I'm not surprised. I'm just really disappointed. Man, I hate that this actually worked. Welcome everybody to JG9 News, where we talk all things NFL all the time. I'm Jaguar Gary, and I representing the 904 from the 602, and today we are talking about the controversial playoff game that took place 2 months ago in the wildcard round between the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. For those who don't remember, the game itself was pretty uneventful, minus the fact that it was absolutely freezing. Some people got frostbite, had their legs amputated, body parts amputated and whatnot because of how bad it was and how cold it was. However, the controversy surrounding this game was the fact that it was behind a paywall, as this was the first time ever that a playoff game was exclusively behind a streaming service. If you wanted to watch this game between the Chiefs and the Dolphins, unless you lived in Kansas City or Miami, you had to do it via Peacock, and you had to pay to use NBC's streaming platform. I criticized this the moment it happened. I thought this was super greedy, and I famously bashed the broadcast right afterwards and in real time, not because of the paywall aspect, because everyone was taking that angle. I didn't want to do that. But I bashed it because the production was just so bad, because NBC had 3 different crews that they were using that weekend. They had 2 games Saturday, 1 game on Sunday. So they didn't have a third crew, and they were making amateurish mistakes that you don't see in any game, because this crew, in all likelihood, didn't work the NFL. Because NBC has 1 game a week, and now they've got 3, and they're spread super thin, and they sent a lot of their bottom-tier guys to this game. Having said that, though, I never in that video said that this was a disaster from a financial standpoint, or that NBC made a bad business decision when it comes to the checkbook and when it comes to profits. Never said that. I just said it was a disaster based on the quality of the production, not based on the finances. Now we have some finances 2 months later, and folks, it's not looking good. And by not looking good, I mean not looking good for fans that want games to be free for the playoffs and not behind a paywall. And it's very good if you are an NBC executive. According to this report, new research from Antenna found that 71% of new Peacock users were still around by the end of February, 7 weeks after the game. They added 3 million signups. Peacock got 3 million new people specifically for that playoff game. 2.13 million still have a Peacock subscription through the end of February, which means they have paid for 2 months worth of the streaming platform. $5.99 a month is what it costs for Peacock. 2 months, these people have paid $11.98 that they would not have paid otherwise, because they wouldn't have bought Peacock because the playoff game was not behind there. So if you multiply that number, $11.98, by the 2.13 million, again, it's not an exact science, because some people might have canceled after the end of January, but they stayed on after the trial and whatnot. But if you multiply that number by 2.13 million, you get $25.5 million made in revenue off the Peacock game, strictly from the streaming service itself. Now, keep in mind, that is not a fixed number. That number could go up. If all 2.13 million people stay on for 12 months, let's say, that's $153 million just off this playoff game that you have to look at it. So it's not like this number is done, it's set, it's finite. It can keep growing. It can't go down, but it can keep growing. So Peacock got $25.5 million worth in subscriptions and fees specifically because of this game. They might be saying, wait a sec, $25.5 million? Yes, the number can go up and whatnot over the next few months, but that seems really bad, right? Because NBC and Peacock, they paid $110 million to broadcast this game. You're telling me they paid $110 million and they only got $25.5 million in subscriptions and whatnot? That seems like they lost a lot of money. Well, not quite. Because let's do some math here on top of this. The cost of a Sunday Night Football ad this season was $882,000. Now, Sunday Night Football, on average, got 21.4 million viewers per game this season. So let's assume for a Saturday night playoff game, as seems to be the tradition over the past few years based on precedent, assume around 25 million viewers. So you got to charge people for around 25 million viewers. And Sunday Night Football, 21.4 million, and ad costs $882,000 over 30 seconds. So doing some proportions, 882,000 over 21.4 million equals X over 25 million. We don't have the exact numbers as data, but if we do those proportions and if everything lines up, you conceivably thought that Peacock charged 1.03 million for a 30-second spot. Because again, we're assuming 25 million, and we're assuming that it's the same proportion as it would be for the Sunday Night Football ads that took place earlier in the season. Now, a Medium studies show that there's an average of 112 commercials for each playoff game. If we divide that by 4, that comes out to 28 commercials per quarter. Now, I should note that Peacock did something interesting in Week 16 and in this wildcard game. That game's with the Bills and the Chargers, this game with the Chiefs and the Dolphins. There were no commercials in the fourth quarter. They went completely commercialless. So you assume that Peacock missed out on about $28.5 million in revenue by not showing any commercials and by just staying on the broadcast the entire time. Having said that, though, even though they didn't show 28 commercials, they showed 84. Let's assume that price of $1.03 million just based on those proportions. NBC Peacock, they sold $86.5 million in advertising space. Now, let's do some math again. They paid $110 million to broadcast the playoff game. They made $86.5 million in commercials if we use those proportions. We don't have the exact numbers in front of us, but we're just doing some educated, calculated guesses. $86.5 million made in commercials, even without airing a single ad in the fourth quarter. Now, granted, this number might be a bit on the lower end because obviously NBC and Peacock, they are not paying for ads of their own programming, so it's not an exact science. But let's just assume $86.5 million. $25.5 million in Peacock subscriptions. Guess what number that comes out to? $112 million. They paid $110 million to broadcast the playoff game. They have netted so far an extra $2 million. They have made $112 million, paid $110. They've netted $2 million. And that number can still increase because it is not a number that is fixed like a regular broadcast because you actually have to subscribe to Peacock. This number can go up. If these 2.13 million people keep Peacock for another month, another 2 months, another 6 months, that number only goes up. Because remember, these people paid for Peacock specifically to watch the Chiefs-Dolphins game, and then they were intrigued enough by the platform and were impressed enough by it. They wanted to see shows like Ted. They want to see Oppenheimer, which is streaming there. They want to see all those things that they're like, you know what? I'm going to stick around. This is a pretty good value. $6 a month. I get all these shows. I get to watch the Premier League. I get to watch all these sporting events. The Olympics are coming up. Why not stick around and pay for Peacock, especially because they might get some NFL games in the future, so might as well have it and have everything in the account. It's only $6 a month. Yes, it adds up, but the average American does not think like that. So as things stand, NBC, after just 2 months, has already turned a profit from this Peacock game, and that can go up. That number will only go up. It will go forever. Until Peacock ceases to exist, that number will go up forever. We won't know the true value of what exactly this playoff game was worth to NBC and Peacock, but we do know this much. They paid $110 million to broadcast the game. They got their money back, and then some, and the money is only going up. From a production standpoint, this broadcast was a disaster. From a money standpoint, this was an absolute success. NBC and Peacock, they won. They won. 100%, they won the battle. A lot of fans were outraged about it. They were outraged about the picture quality, outraged about the fact that certain bars couldn't get the game. I didn't have any issues with streaming or anything like that. I did have an issue with the production quality, but I didn't have any issues with streaming, the actual buffering and whatnot. I had no issues there whatsoever, but your mileage may vary. They did tick off a lot of fans, but at the end of the day, money talks, and the money shows that NBC got a resounding win by putting this game behind a paywall. And what this could mean for the future, more games behind paywalls. We know Amazon Prime is getting in on the action. They're televising a wild card game or some sort of playoff game for the 2024-25 season. Peacock might do it again. We don't know. Will Paramount Plus get in on the action next? Who is to say? Either way, this game, a resounding success for NBC and for Peacock. This was the first time a game was ever behind a streaming platform for the playoffs, and I can assure you this much, it will definitely not be the last. But what are your thoughts on this? Did you like the Peacock game? Did you not like the Peacock game? Do you think this is just the beginning? Do you think that NBC made the right decision from a monetary standpoint, putting this game behind a paywall? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. That's going to do it for this episode of JG9 News. Be sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out my main channel, JaguarGator9, where we talk all things NFL history all the time. Until next time, this is JaguarGator9 signing off. And as always, go Jags.